This week is pretty interesting Shabbos because it's not only Shabbos Nachamu, the first of the 7 of Nachamos, it's also Tu B'Av, the day when Moshe Rabbeinu began davening. And Pnei Yeshua in Brachas Lamed Beis says that Moshe Rabbeinu, he got his tzivui, his commandment, to kill Og and Sichon, the two kings, was on Tu B'Av. And he felt that because this was a special day, he started to daven, and the Bnei Yeshua said he davened 172 days. If you take out the 28 Shabbosim, between Tu B'Av and Zayin Adar, and you end up with 516. It's 172 times 3 is 516. And because Hashem only came to him on Tu B'Av in the day, so therefore he only had 515 prayers, which is the word Va'eschanan. Now, if you also know that Sichon and Og, the Mekubalim, all say the Pri Tzadik of Rav Tzadok HaKohen of Lublin, the Sfas Emes, all speak, and all the Hasidic Shvarim talk about this, and it's also mentioned that Sichon and Og are the Tefillin Shel Yad and the Tefillah Shel Rosh. Sichon Asher Yoshev b'Cheshbon, he's from Cheshbon, and a Cheshbon is in the head, and Og is in the hand. Og was Eliezer Eved Avram, who got from Nimrod when he came out of the fire, and Og really wanted his daughter to marry Yitzchak, and that's why Avram had to swear him in. Bottom line, Sichon and Og were Tefillin Shel Yad and Tefillin Shel Rosh. So on the day of Tu B'Av, where Hashem commands Moshe, Moshe suddenly gets a new light. He gets a new idea. He's like, suddenly, maybe I can come into Eretz Yisrael, because if Hashem is including me in destroying Og and Sichon, so perhaps I have a portion in Eretz Yisrael. And this is also magnified by the fact that until this time, Moshe was sworn, as soon as he hit the rock, Hashem made a shavua that you can't come in. So we see that the day of Tu B'Av is a day that's mesugal to come into Eretz Yisrael. We also see the same idea of the people who died. It says that Lo hayu yom tovim, there was no happier day than the day of Tu B'Av. Why is Tu B'Av happy? What's so happy about Tu B'Av? It's the happiest day of the year, aside for Yom Kippur. That doesn't sound like much, but Yom Kippur, if you think about it spiritually, it's a happy day. But Tu B'Av is happy because they stopped dying, because there were 600,000 who had to die. There was basically a shift. There was going to be new people born, and this generation was going to die above 60. So they go into the grave every year on they go on Tisha B'Av, they go into the grave, and on the 38th year, it's a whole debate how it works out. But the last set of 15,000, if you divide 40 by 60,000, you end up with the 40 years by the 600,000, you end up with 15,000 a year died. So the last set of 15,000 for some reason didn't die. And when they got up on Yud Av, they get up out of the grave and they realize they're alive, and they go back in the grave every day, and they're all above 60. So the rule was that the lifespan was cut down by Hashem until 60. That was the onish of the Chet HaMeraglim. And Moshe doesn't get to come into Eretz Yisrael. And Moshe, when on Tu B'Av, they get out of the grave and they see the full moon, and they say, obviously, the 9th of Av has passed. It's the 15th of Av, and they made a big celebration. And those people, and this is odd because if you look in the Medrash, it's not so obvious why or how this works, but let's just take it at face value. Besides for Moshe and besides for Yeshua, these 15,000 also come into Eretz Yisrael. So the last 15,000 were spared. So we see from this that Tu B'Av is a special day, not only for Shabbos Nachamu this year, but also for allowing to enter into Eretz Yisrael. But the question I want to discuss in this video, and what we're going to talk about for the next half of this video, is going to be Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu decides he's going to pray. And on Tu B'Av, he realizes that Bnei Yisrael are going to go into Eretz Yisrael. The tikkun has been done for the Chet HaMeraglim, and he realizes that now we're starting a new shift. And what happens is that on Tu B'Av, he starts davening. Pnei Yeshua in Brachas Lamed Beis Amud Aleph explains something phenomenal, that the word Va'eschanan is 515 because it relates to the 172 days between Tu B'Av and Zayin Adar, times 3 comes to 516, like we explained before. But he says also that Moshe Rabbeinu suddenly had a new strength from this day, that he thought that he's able to somehow change Hashem. Now you might ask, so why is it such a special day that we're going to come into Eretz Yisrael? I mean, at the end of the day, Moshe Rabbeinu didn't come into Eretz Yisrael. So the Gemara in Shabbos actually says that if Moshe would have davened another tefillah, he would have come into Eretz Yisrael. And for whatever reason, Hashem decided he's not going to come into Eretz Yisrael. And if you want to raya someone, I learn every night. I learn Chabura. We learn Navi, and we've been learning for 4 or 5 years already. Navi. We went through all of Nevi'im already. We're doing Chazara now. And if you look into Navi, you see that Moshe Rabbeinu and the Nevi'im were very different. That Moshe Rabbeinu was the one who gave the Torah, and Yeshua, when he brings into Eretz Yisrael, they become the people of action, the people who are taking action. And one of the things that I recently learned, which was pretty amazing, is that the time that we have from Yeshua until Yeshua dies, there was no chet. There was no chet in Klal Yisrael. That this nation, like the Zohar says, the Sefer Bamidbar and Sefer Devarim are separated ben chaylim d'Orais l'chaylim d'Mashkana. There are certain soldiers that came and got the Torah, and certain soldiers and who came into Eretz Yisrael. And these are two different ideas. One is the Nishma, the people who heard the Torah on Har Sinai, and one is the Nasa, the people who come into Eretz Yisrael and actually work the land. So there's a Sfas Emes that talks about this idea of the switcheroo, because Nasa v'Nishma, the Medrash says, was the sod of Malachim. It was the secret of the angels. To be able to say, I'm going to do before I listen, that doesn't make much sense. And it didn't work very well for Klal Yisrael, because they ended up doing Chet HaEgel. They said, yes, we're going to do everything you want, but it doesn't really work. But the idea of Tefillah seems to be the central theme of Va'eschanan. So getting back to Sichon and Og, when Moshe gets the message that Sichon and Og are his job to kill on Tu B'Av, it's then he decides to daven. Sichon and Og, we said, represent the tefillin sheyah and tefillin shalosh. And we said Moshe daven 515 tefillos. And we said Va'eschanan is Gematria 515. You know what else is Gematria 515? Yad v'rosh. Yud Daled Reish Aleph Shin is also 515. So it's very simple that Moshe Rabbeinu was supposed to daven these 515 tefillos. Says the Ramdu, Ramoshe David Valley, the Rebbe or the Talmud of the Ramchal. He says, and I also saw this idea in the Ma'am Loez, Rav Yaakov Kuli writes this. Rav Yaakov Kuli didn't write Bamidbar, but I think Rav Yitzchak Al-Ghazi did. Big Talmud Chochem. He says that Moshe Rabbeinu really wanted Klal Yisrael to daven for him. Because if Bnei Yisrael would have actually taken the energy and davened for Moshe Rabbeinu, perhaps he would have come in. And that was what was chasser. So I want to talk to you about what tefillah is. So to do this, we'll have to go back to, I want to go with you. Not a lot of people know this. That Moshe Rabbeinu, not only did he write the Torah, the five Sfarim, he also wrote Parshas Bilam, which is part of the Torah. It's hard to understand why Chazal will tell us that he also wrote Parshas Bilam. But Parshas Bilam is the story of Bilam, which they were originally thinking of putting inside of Kriya Shema, that we would say this every day. It's very important. So he writes the Chumash, and Parshas Bilam is part of the Chumash. The second book that he wrote is Iyov. Now, Iyov is an interesting story. So you think the author of the Torah, Moshe Rabbeinu, the Gemara in Bava Metzia says, I think in Mem something, I don't remember, says that Moshe Rabbeinu wrote Sefer Iyov. What does it say in Sefer Iyov? It says that Moshe Rabbeinu, that there was this man named Iyov. Now, I want to give you in modern terms, he was a billionaire. Okay, he had endless amount of factories, he had endless amount of workers, he had endless amount of machinery and cars, and he lived in a very nice house, and he had a beautiful wife and 10 kids. What happens? in Eov it says the Satan comes to Hashem, and Hashem is so happy with Eov. He's like, wow, he's such a Oived Hashem. He's doing so well. He loves me, and I'm able to work with him. He's such a tzaddik, Eov. And the Satan says he's not such a tzaddik. You know why he's so nice? You know why he's such a tzaddik? Because he has so much money. Because he has so much livelihood. He has so much things going on in his life. So of course he loves you. What's not to love about you when everything is great? So Hashem said, let's see what happens. So he sends 4 problems, 4 terrible things to Eov. The first thing is he says, all your ox, donkeys, and servants, everybody's going to die. He takes 500 of this, 500 of that, all the servants. And basically, the oxes and the donkeys are the things that carry his business. He basically burns down his business. All his factories go down. And all his workers get killed inside. He's in lawsuits. And then all his sheep and all his shepherds. So his sheep are the people, all his followers, all just disappear. And all the people who gathered them in, all the people who took care of the other factories, they all disappear. And then his camels. He has 3,000 camels. That all his camels just get confiscated. And he's left literally with nothing. A guy who's a billionaire, and he is nothing, literally nothing. And to top it all off, his 10 kids die. A house falls on him. He had 7 boys and 3 girls. The house collapses on them. And he's alone in the world. He's lost his business. He's lost his kids. And then the icing on the cake, he suddenly gets this infectious skin disease, and his entire body fills up with boils. So here, in a matter of days, he's gone for I don't know the time frame, but in a matter of time, he's gone from being this fabulously wealthy Oived Hashem. Satan comes to God and says, let's see what we could do. Takes him, puts him down on the floor. He's literally down on the floor. He's with boils. And what does Eov say? Hashem nosan, Hashem lokach, Yishem Hashem mevorach me'ata ve'ata. God gave, God takes. May God's name be blessed. And then Hashem says, the test isn't over. He says, I'm going to take 3 people, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Sophar. His friends are going to come visit him while he's laying there on the floor in boils, suffering. So the first one says to him, listen, I'll tell you what. He comes over to visit him. He says, perhaps you've done a lot of sin. Perhaps you maybe you steal. Maybe you did averos chamuros. He starts giving him musar. He says God's always judged by God. All the judgment is good. And each one of his friends start to tell him musar and tell him, why this happened. And this is a tikkun for your nefesh. He says, give him all of ideas. And you think that Eov might have been tempted. But if Eov says, Hashem nosan, Hashem lokach, Yishem Hashem mevorach. But Hashem comes to Eov and he says to Eov, let me tell you something. He says, they're going to bring karbanos, they're going to do a tikkun for what they did. But I want to tell you that your friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Sophar, they're getting punished. They're going to have a tremendous punishment. But Hashem says, here's your opportunity. I want you to daven for them. And if you daven for them with a full heart, even though you don't like them, because they were trying to take you away, they were trying to ruin your challenge. And the Satan wanted these people to ruin his challenge. And he says to him, okay. And Eov starts davening. And he davens for these people. The Gemara says, and this never set well with me. How is it possible that if God sends me a problem and someone else has the same problem, I should daven for him? It sounds crazy. Now, I want to tell you something. It might just be crazy. And I'm going to explain to you something, and just bear with me. This might sound a little out of it, but I'm going to tell you about the Sefer Chassidim. The Sefer Chassidim says like this. He says that we know it says Anybody who davens for someone else and they need the exact same thing, they get answered first. Says the Sefer Chassidim. He says, when Hashem sends somebody something in this world, it's for a reason. We used to have a korban chatas. A korban chatas was when a person did an avera b'shogeg. He accidentally does something. Was he at fault? Well, if he was at fault, then why doesn't he bring a korban chatas if he does it b'mezid, on purpose? Says Reb Tzadok HaKohen that a chatas comes for a person because Hashem wants to show him where he needs to work. Says the Sefer Chassidim that had a person just daven for himself, that could have helped the other person. But sometimes, obviously, and I want to explain this Sefer Chassidim. He says like this. He says the only time, first I'll tell you what he says, and then I'll explain to you the caveat of why this needs to be taken specifically. Sefer Chassidim says that what it says that if you pray for someone else and you need the same Yeshua, that person gets answered first, is learned from two people. Is learned from Avram Avinu when he davened for Avimelech, and for Eov when he davened for Eliphaz, Bildad, and so far. And I'll explain why. Says Sefer Chassidim that it's only because Avram hated or didn't like Avimelech, because Avimelech took his wife. And what happens by Avimelech, if you look in the Chumash, it says that Avimelech took Sarah, Imenu, our mother, the mother of all the Jews, and took her from Avram. And Hashem comes, and it's a psukim in the Torah. Hashem comes to Avimelech in a dream and says, Avimelech, you took Sarah, and you're going to get sick. And comes to Avram and tells Avram, you need to daven for Avimelech. And when you daven for Avimelech, he's going to get better. So Hashem clearly says that if a person says a Sefer Chassidim, that the only time it helps to daven for someone else when a person has a problem, the same problem themselves, is when you don't like that person because you're over on your midos. And Eve also didn't like these people. They were ruining his challenge. So what do we learn from this? What is the Sefer Chassidim saying? He's saying that a prayer, every prayer, is an opportunity to be able to be Mekasher to Hashem. Now, a person, when he does for himself, when he davens for his own needs, it may seem like selfish. Obviously, we know the mashal. If you're on the plane, first put on your own gas, your own ear mask if there's a loss in pressure, and then put on the child. Says the Sefer Chassidim that every person obviously should daven for other people. There's endless stories of people davening for other people. There's nothing wrong with davening for other people. But says the Sefer Chassidim, if you're doing it that you should get better, so you're doing it for selfish reasons. That's the exact opposite of what the message is. The message is that if you daven, you should daven for yourself, not for selfish reasons. You should daven for yourself because when you are metuken, Klal Yisrael is metuken, says the Sefer Chassidim. That of course the Yeshua will come, and of course you should daven for other people as well. But by davening for yourself, that comes the tikkun. And here I want to talk about, I want to explain this idea because there's still something feels like it's missing over here. What exactly does this mean? What do you davening for yourself is not selfish? Let's dig a little deeper, and I think this is going to come explain. Moshe Rabbeinu got his voice back when in last week's Parsha he starts speaking, and he speaks for 37 days until Rosh Chodesh, until Zayin Adar. And when Moshe Rabbeinu starts speaking, he suddenly is able to speak well. And in Parshas Va'eschanan, he starts to daven. And he's davening to come into Eretz Yisrael. And every tefillah that he davened brought himself closer. But he never was able to come in. Says the Medrash, there's asara l'shainos of tefillah. There's 10 languages of tefillah. Starts from Shava, and then Tzako, and Nipul, and Rino, all the different levels. And Pilul, and the final level is Va'eschanan. It's Chanina. What do we say about Moshe's tefillah? That Moshe Rabbeinu davened for nothing. That he did not ask to use his schusim. And I want to dig into this because this is very, very powerful. There was no person ever in the history of the world who had the amount of rights to enter Eretz Yisrael. Moshe Rabbeinu took them out of Mitzrayim. He crossed the sea. He took them to Har Sinai. He davened for the eagle. He davened for them endless times throughout the Midbar. And he shouldn't come into Eretz Yisrael. And the place, they're about to come into Eretz Yisrael. So he had the makom and the zman, the most opportune reason that Moshe Rabbeinu could have said, because of this. And here I want to take you deep. Mamish, very deep. And hang on. Hold on to your seat. Because Moshe Rabbeinu said, there are two types of tefillah. There's rachum v'chanun. What's the difference? Sometimes a person could think in his head, and it's not true, but he could think, because I did this, I'm going to get this. He thinks that Hashem is like his boss, his kids, his neighbor, his friends, his business partner. It's not a yin for yang. It's not a tit for tat. It doesn't work that way. So Moshe Rabbeinu said, if a person does a tefillah, what does rachum mean? If a person does a tefillah and he says, I want to use the schar that I have for putting on tzitzis, for lighting candles. I want to use that for Shabbos. I want to use that reward to help this person get better. Says Hashem, the reward that Hashem gives us is incredible. Why should Hashem give us reward? Imagine serving your creator. Isn't that in itself an unbelievable thing? We live in a physical world, but think about what this means, the power, the energy of everything. We're serving that. Isn't that enough? Hashem gives us schar. But he says the schar is only in Olam Haba. It's not in this world. So you want to use that for this? It's impossible. It's a different currency. It's not even exchangeable, says Hashem. That's rachum. Hashem says, you know what? It's impossible. But what I'm going to do it for you anyways. Even though you're thinking wrong, you have no idea what's going on, says the Tiferes Tzion on the Medrash Rabbah. It's impossible. So that's rachum. Hashem says, I'll give it to you anyways. Chanun is a matnas chinam. Moshe Rabbeinu was able to stand in front of all of Bnei Yisrael, about to come into Eretz Yisrael. He just took them out. He went through everything. He had every reason in the world. But he said, I want to do matnas chinam. I want to do it for free. No money, no nothing. Today I had an opportunity this morning. I needed help. I had a car that was 20 minutes from my house, and I needed to pick it up. I have a good friend. I called him up. I said, I know that it's Bein Hazmanim. I said, are you doing anything now? He said, no. So I picked him up at his house. We picked up the car. He brought it back to my house, and I'm driving him back home. And I say to him, I'm really grateful that you did this favor. Is there any way I could make it up to you? So he says to me, don't you remember a couple of years ago, I once was in a similar situation and you helped me? So I said, no, I mamash don't remember. And then I remembered. So what happened over here? I was coming to him as a friend. As a friend, help me. You're my friend. So of course you'll help me. You helped me? I didn't even remember that. I didn't remember that I helped him. Because he's a friend. Are we friends with Hashem? Do we think Hashem is our friend? Do we believe that? Do we think that Hashem wants to give us everything and that he has all the money in the world? He has all the power in the world. He has all the glory in the world. He has all the kavod in the world. And he can make us anything. And when Hashem gives us money, Hashem gives us wealth of knowledge and physical wealth. It doesn't cost him anything. It's endless for Hashem. So how could we possibly believe that we need a reason to get something? If I ask you, can I borrow $10,000? I know that you're going to be missing $10,000. But if I ask Hashem for $10,000, he's not missing anything. So when a person says, I'm doing a mitzvah, because I did this mitzvah, let me get that mitzvah, he's missing the point. This is what the Sefer Chassidim means. That's not the point. The point isn't that Hashem wants you to have schusim. The point, says the Svasem, is for you to stop thinking in terms of money. Stop thinking in terms of reward. You'll say to me, the Gemara says, that his friend should get better. If someone gives money to tzedakah, that his friend should get better. Of course, he's a tzaddik gamor. I'm not saying not to do that. Give tzedakah, do mitzvos. But understand that the schar is not for the tzedakah. It's for the tzedakah. It's for the reason that you brought it. And I'm going to explain something very, very subtle. Sometimes you have a shir. I go to a shir, and we sometimes have something l'uli nishmas somebody. And it's a suffix in my head. Could you say l'uli nishmas if you're already doing something? You're anyways going to have the shir. How could you make that l'uli nishmas? Sometimes you could do something extra. And when you do something bikoyach from that person, so his neshama mamish has an aliyah. And also in this world, when a person gives tzedakah mamish, so the mitzvah of tzedakah doesn't go to that person. I'll tell you even further. And this I'll try to say quickly because it's a huge idea. Mamish a huge idea. If you look in Igros Moshe, there's 40 pages devoted in Chelek Ches, the blue one, the one that's out of print, about the idea of Yisachar Zvulun. Yisachar Zvulun is not automatic. He says that Yisachar was the rich people. They had the best fields. And Zvulun were the poor people. And Yisachar said, we're going to do you, Zvulun, a favor. And we're going to allow you to work our fields. And we're going to allow you to take the produce and go sell it. You'll pay us rent for the fields and we'll split the profit. So Yisachar was doing Zvulun a favor. And Moshe says, Paskin's la'alocha. Yisachar Zvulun only works 50-50. And if a person does 49-51, it doesn't work. And he even is mistapik if the person is usher to do that. And he says, because you're not allowed to give more than a chomish. And he says, maybe you have mitzvahs of supporting Torah. So you have mitzvahs of this. He says, but if a person's rich, let's say a person's unbelievable rich, and he wants to support 10 kailul people in 10 different kailuls, he's allowed to do it, even though it's not 50%, because he has the mitzvah of being machzik, Talmud Torah. It's a beautiful, wonderful, great mitzvah. But the schar of limud Torah is non-transferable. The chidush of Bnei Gad of Reuben, the wisdom of it is that it's able to work on 50-50. That Hashem said we're going to mizakeh Zvulun. Yismach Zvulun b'tzeisecha v'yisachar b'oyelecha. We're going to mizakeh them and give them an opportunity to get 50%. But it's unfathomable. It's non-transferable. Take a look in Igros Moshe, you'll be amazed. Bottom line is that we have to understand something very deep over here. That in Tefillah, when it's so popular today, donate money here and you'll get a Yeshua, do this and you'll get that, do this and get that. We need to stop thinking of a Kadosh Baruch Hu as a bargaining tool. And that was Moshe Rabbeinu's message. Moshe said, I'm going to take the last days of my life, the last 200 days of my life from Tu B'Av to this Shabbos. But the Gemara says, Ein Yom Smechim K'moi Tu B'Av. There's no happier day than Tu B'Av. It's the most happy day of the year. Except for Yom Kippur, where you get all your because the Mesim stopped dying and they started having shidduchim. We were matter to have that people can intermarry in the different shvatim. There was suddenly an achdus, and that's what brings the geula. That's how we can have the koyach that Moshe thought we can come into Eretz Yisrael. And this is why Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven wanted their chelik in Chutz La'aretz. Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven said, "Give us our chelik in Chutz La'aretz. We want to have it's Eretz Sichon v'Oig. We want to have a tefillin shel Yad v'Roish, which is 550. We want to have our chelik, because then Moshe Rabbeinu will be like he's in Eretz Yisrael. And Moshe Rabbeinu said, I'm also in Eretz Yisrael. I'm now in Eretz Yisrael. So maybe I should daven that I should come in. And Hashem said, Heref no. Va'eschanan, on this day, which day? On Tu B'Av. This Shabbos, we could be zoicha to Eretz Yisrael. Eretz Yisrael is what's called, Hashem says, Matana Toiva, like Shabbos, the Sefer Tevis of Zvas Cholav Udvash is Shabbos. The Sefer Tevis is Cholav Udvash, Tachas L'Shaynech, the last three letters are also Shabbos. He says that Shabbos is Bizman, but Eretz Yisrael is B'Mokum. And I said, let me come in. Let me come into Eretz Yisrael. Va'eschanan on Tu B'Av, Hashem said to him, Heref no, because if you would daven 516 tefillos, like it says in the Gemara, I don't remember where, the Gemara says that if you would have davened another tefillah, you would have come in. Because Elokim times 5 is 516. Says the Ramdu, that if Bnei Yisrael would have davened for Moshe, he might have gone in. But Bnei Yisrael weren't holding there. The Satan said to Eov, let's prove that he really loves HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that he's willing to accept it. How did Eov accept it? He said to his three friends who he had to daven for, Eliphaz and Bildad and Zophar, he said to them, don't tell me cheshbonos. Don't tell me why my kids died, why his 7 boys and 3 girls died, why his business was burnt to the ground, why everybody died, why he's laying there with boils, why his camels were lost, his sheep were lost, his oxen were lost. Don't tell me that it's a tikkun. Don't tell me I did chet. Don't give me reasons. Silence. And he said, Hashem nosan, Hashem lokach, Yishem Hashem evarach me'atov yadalo. That's what we say by every Levaya. This Shabbos, we have an opportunity to ask for a matnas chinam. And Eretz Yisrael is a matnas chinam. And it's a day that's mesugal to ask from Hashem to have the schus to come into Eretz Yisrael. We could all come. Everybody ends up here. There's not a person, a Jew in the world, who won't come to Eretz Yisrael and end here forever and ever. This is our final destination. We've left Mitzrayim. We've never fully gone into Eretz Yisrael. We're waiting, and Moshe is waiting with Klal Yisrael and Chutz La'aretz. Hashem said, you wait, neged bal pa'or. You wait, neged bal tzefoin. Bal tzefoin, the Medrash says, was a screen. Take a look. The Medrash says it was a screen that they looked into and they were able to see the future. You stood in front of Eretz Yisrael, Moshe, and you couldn't come in. But I'll tell you something nice. As if what we said until now wasn't nice. Moshe Rabbeinu says of Moshe David Valley that he saw all of Eretz Yisrael. He was able to capture all the places in Eretz Yisrael in one look. And we're waiting for Moshe Rabbeinu to come into Eretz Yisrael. And when Moshe Rabbeinu comes into Eretz Yisrael, it will be with all of Klal Yisrael. We have 7 million in Eretz Yisrael. Be'ezrat Hashem, the other 4 million, maybe 5 million that are still outside of in Galus, will be Zoicha through Tefillah this Shabbos. Even though Moshe didn't daven on Shabbos, when Tu B'Av, he davened on Tu B'Av, and we could think about our connection. How could we not think about Yerushalayim on Parshas Nachamu? The greatest Nechama is Like it says, Vayinocham Hashem ki yoseh es ha'adam. The greatest Nechama is that we're able to come into Eretz Yisrael. And that's what we do on Nachamu. Nachamu is that we have the koach to come. And it's a matnas chinam. We don't need schusim. We just need to show up. I want to bless all of Klal Yisrael, that our tefillos for our friends, and we should daven for our friends. But when we have something that we need to fix, we need to do it for ourselves, because that's what Hashem wants. We don't understand why Hashem brings things in the world. I'm not here to explain that I'm not his spokesperson. But perhaps all Hashem wants is for us to stop giving reasons. No more reasons. It's not because I did this, I get this. It's if we're his children, if we're his best friend, if he delights in us, if he loves us, if he's happy for us, if he wants what's best for us, everything we have is exactly the way it's supposed to be. But he wants us to ask to come into Eretz Yisrael. And on this Shabbos, we should be zeicha to ask and receive, to come into Eretz Yisrael, and we should see Nechamos, and we should be able to be zeicha to come into Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and see the Geula Shlema b'meher v'yameinu with the kibbutz galuyos, and we should come in. I'll end off that it says, we say Chasoif Zroya Kodshecho, that Hashem slowly reveals his arm. And if you look in the Navi over there, it says clearly that the Geula will happen slowly, and Klal Yisrael will come into Eretz Yisrael, and Yerushalayim will be rebuilt. And Yerushalayim is being rebuilt today. And the Jews have come to Eretz Yisrael. And like the Gemara says, when you see fruit coming out of Eretz Yisrael, when the land begins to produce produce, know that Mashiach is on the way. And I'll add that Mashiach is not only on the way, he's walking through Yerushalayim today. May we be zeicha to see him soon. Thank you. Have a great day. Thank you for watching. If you like this content, please like and subscribe. This helps the YouTube algorithm. There's over 2 billion hours of watch time. That's 114,000 years of content every day. By you liking, subscribing, commenting, this helps grow the channel. Even a like or a comment and watch time helps other people be able to get this content. If you like this content, let me know. Please comment. I read every comment. Thank you for watching. Have a great day. We should all meet together in Yerushalayim HaBenuya.